So in today's episode of the Featured Podcast, we're going to talk about university and whether or not it is worth getting a degree depending on the department. And if you're deciding to drop out, what you should consider. And I'm also going to talk a bit about my story of dropping out 2 years ago, forming into the company, and at around the 2-year mark right now, what I think of the decision and whether or not it is worth going back. So I know it's like a big topic. I could talk hours and hours about that, but let's just go ahead and get started.
Yeah, what did you do at university?
So I went to business school right out of high school in Victoria. I mean, I think I barely got into the program. My school grades were not good in high school. I got rejected by UBC in like a couple hours. I think I got filtered out by the system, but I went to business school for 3 years. The way it's structured is you have 2 years of taking general classes. I even took like film photography, history of money. I might have even taken a theater class because I heard it was easy. And then in the core years,
Wait, hold up. You took a theater class?
Yeah, but I didn't have to do any acting. It was like a 3-hour night class. I don't know. I wasn't paying attention to anything. Surprisingly, film photography was harder than I expected. But third year, you go into your core business. You take your accounting classes and international business. And in the fourth year, you pick your specialization, whether it's like entrepreneurship, general, or service management. And so I got to the end of third year. Most people were going on exchanges. They were excited for that. My grades were terrible, and I wasn't planning to go abroad for months because I had stuff that I had to run out here. And wouldn't have been accepted anyways, but I ended up taking like 2 weeks off in between the terms, went to a YouTube event and came back and had to start the fourth year university right after the final exams were done from the third year as entrepreneurship. After going for like a week, literally, because your course drop deadline is within the first 2 weeks, I believe, I decided to leave and with no plans to go back.
So you left how soon? Like, what did you have left? And like, for context, I never went to post-secondary, so I'm kind of learning as I go here.
Yeah, I had 2 terms left. So it was a specialization term and like another academic term, as well as work terms. The work terms weren't a problem. I just used my own company and just applied for that. But yeah, I left at the start of the fourth year, which is really late to leave. You're like right at the home stretch. Yeah. But I left in 2018 and I hired my first full-time after that, incorporated into a company, which I really had to do because I got my tax bill during exams of third year and it was not pretty. So kind of just sharpened up the business side of things and then eventually told all the brands that we had known for many years now that were now available to travel. Previously, travel was not something that I could do during class. And if I did travel, it'd be on like a weekend and I would fly and go straight from the airport to class. Travel around the world, obviously made a ton of videos. Last year did a home renovation, which is also my office. And now I think is the 2-year mark where it's sort of looking into the next chapter. Obviously trying to make our YouTube videos better. That's not going anywhere, but also looking into buying a second space, which will be the production studio for everything, which I've always wanted. I've always filmed in the same place that I lived. The podcast, we're right here. That's another area of the company that is expanded. We're finally also making a website for Featured Media. It's been 2 years and you still can't find any record of it online. It's just mainly been for like tax and like the back end reasons, which is the biggest reason you should incorporate. And also the website, and bought into Dangerfield last year, which is my clothing company. So we're staying busy, but with classes going online, I think it's kind of reignited the conversation as to whether or not university makes sense, because I went to class last week and I have another 4 days to decide as to whether or not I want to stay.
What value are you getting? Like, this is something that I always think about. And like personally for me, the business experience I've got, I feel almost equal to somebody that's gone and done a full degree.
Because from age 20 to now, you've worked at a car dealership. That's sales experience, real world retail sales experience. That's right, you also worked at Best Buy, and those are both like the perfect industries to gain experience in sales, and that kind of led you into real estate. Your family is in real estate. You kind of just have
to have an obsession with it. Like you just have to like business and want to be creative with it. Like there is creativity to it, and that was always the thing for me. I never went to post-secondary. One, because of grades. I was just one of those kids that just didn't do homework.
Dude, I had like play C's video games in high school.
C's and D's
for an Asian kid.
Oh my gosh, how was that?
For a kid with Asian parents.
Spankings were extra hard on report card day.
My grades were so bad. I don't know if this had anything to do with it, but my math teacher retired the same year that I graduated.
Couldn't handle you.
She used to keep me in class till like 5:30 sometimes to tutor me.
Dude, shout out to her. That's really nice of her.
Yeah, I know.
And you still got a C? How dishonorable,
yeah,
man.
I know,
she spent
man.
post time with you? Goodness.
But going back to the value of university, it's I think what it does teach you, and I think a lot of people will attribute to this, whether they get any value or not, aside from like putting it on your resume and hopefully getting a job a lot of times in the corporate world, is that it teaches you to respect time.
Agreed.
It's easier said than done. I think I grew up respecting time quite well just because my parents made me do a lot of stuff that I didn't want to do. I used to have to get up at 9 a.m. every Saturday to go to Chinese class, and I had to get up at 7 to do the homework for it because I never did it during the week. And then I'd have piano practice an hour a day. And then I used to love hockey. So every time I got to play hockey, it was like a treat. It just felt a little bit more special. And then making YouTube videos after that was another area where I felt like I valued that time much more. And when you're young, if you just are given all this time to work with, you don't know how to plan it out, and you end up having to realize the hard way that you have to set yourself a schedule, which is like going to university and establishing a kind of workflow. So I think what I did get out of it in the first couple of years was I really did value time a lot more, and I had to juggle a lot of things. So I never went to any parties or whatever.
Something that just kind of came to my mind when you were talking about that was, how did you, like, let's say peak moment when the channel was really starting to gain some momentum and school was also extremely busy, maybe around exams. How are you delegating your time and getting the most out of it?
So in class, I would always bring a computer and I would just like look through which companies to email, respond to those, do the admin side, plan some videos, write stuff down. And every Friday I would film. And then on Saturdays, I would edit the entire morning and not eat the first meal until the video has been uploaded. I think that's sort of like a ritual at this point. So I still got like one video out a week. Sometimes I would do two. And other than that, Monday to Friday, you're in class. And I think what people don't realize is even though class might only be like an hour and a half, 2 hours, if it's in the middle of your day, you really can't, it's hard to get things done because you got to eat. That takes an hour. You have your things to do here and there. And at the end of the day, your mind still always has to think about, oh, you have this stats to do. You have a class assignment, group project and everything. So in the fourth year, I was close enough to making it, but I was just like so unhappy that I couldn't see myself doing it for another 6 months. And I just felt like there was a big opportunity that I was kind of leaving behind in where the company was at. And I think after I got my personal tax bill, which was, I think it was in the 1 percentile where I had to pay that up. That's when I really realized that it just didn't make sense to be going to school right now. If there was a opportunity that was kind of ticking, that I could chase. Right. So at that time, it was a pretty easy decision to leave. I wanted to leave much earlier, but I think, it really did teach me the value of time. And maybe if I dropped out a little bit earlier, I wouldn't have been as disciplined or ready to be able to do things the way it's supposed to be done when you drop out. So I guess everything does happen for a reason. But in my case, I felt like in class, I was not really paying attention. I wasn't very interested in the stuff they were teaching. And I also believed that a lot of the concepts in like marketing especially were very outdated. I think I failed the marketing exam. Only one slide was talking about like social media and YouTube wasn't even considered. And I just felt like this was stuff from like 10 years ago. And I already had real world experience and kind of saw things differently than the book was trying to teach it. I think a lot of times university it does brainwash you into thinking it's the right way or the certain way. And I feel like exploring it for yourself is the best way to learn. So personally, I never had good grades, but I was decent at stuff that I really focused on. So it just wasn't for me. I could see why it's useful for people, but I think the only class I actually learned something could have been accounting. It's very black and white and it doesn't change your balance sheet stuff. Right. After 3 years, I still couldn't balance a balance sheet, but I still passed somehow. I think that's the only area where I really learned stuff. And eventually when I transitioned into the business a couple weeks after dropping out and meeting with the accountant and talking about how to structure my company, it did make it a little bit easier to understand what they were trying to explain to me. But again, you can learn that stuff online if you really wanted to, online courses. I just felt like it didn't make much sense to pay a business to teach you how to run a business. A lot of times it's just like the amount of course content is stuff that you could do at your own pace, at least at the university that I went to. But then all the group stuff and the orientation and like the discussions that they do group by group, I just felt like it was just a lot of housekeeping and stuff in between that was not the meat of the content that they were trying to teach you.
Right.
And that they make you do like the preliminary courses in the first couple years and also like all these electives to kind of filter you out the first couple years and also make some money off of the class tuition. But you were able to take any class you want to be able to get into the business program, aside from a few prerequisites, which I failed a couple of them here and there. But yeah, I was taking like photography.
Was there anything that you pulled from learning in there that you were able to apply to your business or helped you maybe see things a little bit differently?
I think most of it was indirect knowledge. And that's the same with like my parents making me learn the piano and Chinese. Like I can't tell you what key is what on the piano nowadays. And when it comes to speaking Chinese, I don't love to speak it either. Those are things that maybe trained the brain a little bit, made me more committed to time and memorization and maybe hand-eye coordination. I don't know, but it's university wise, I didn't feel like I was getting much value, but it was also my own fault. I was just so focused on something else that I cared about a lot more that I wasn't really seeing the value or appreciating the value of it at its time. I just felt like it was something that was pulling me back from what I really wanted to do and what I thought I was much better at / had
looking back now, was there anything that you'd change about the way maybe you saw university as far as the value? Like maybe your look on the negativity in your life that university was, would having a different mindset back then have changed anything?
Yes, but at the same time, I think a lot of times when you're trying to weigh the positives and negatives of dropping out, it usually does lean a certain direction. And a lot of times it's to stay and like it opens your doors in the future. It's just something that you always have. But I think it was a unique situation because, I mean, it sounds bad when you say you're dropping out to make YouTube videos. It sounds really stupid. I totally agree with that. But I think after being in the industry for that long, I just saw like everything that I'd built up and worked on to that point that I felt like I should have gone full time with it. So the way I saw it was that it was a unique case where it only made sense to leave.
That's where like looking back for me, university may have been a point of value only for the connections that you can gain through it. You got people that want to be in business and have a drive to build something. Was there anybody that you met while you were at university that you may still talk to today, or have you seen them go on to accomplish anything?
I think it's too early to tell. Even in high school, aside from a few people
at this point,
it is too early. I mean, my full time is from the program, but I also was not very social in school. I was just like in and out, and I was only there if I had to be. We also did have a few good guest speakers: Don Matrick, Jeff Mallett, Yahoo, and Microsoft guys. So and also Felix Butterfield or Stuart Butterfield. There was good guest speakers, but I feel like in terms of connections, it does seem like, aside from people you meet to start companies and stuff, people are at a different stage. In university, you're spending the 4 years and then you're starting your career. Whereas I had already been in the industry for 6-7 years and I was kind of just like there to be there. So yeah, I think it just made sense to leave because I wasn't seeing the value in it. And obviously the connections that I had from the tech industry from being in it for that many years, it only made sense to make the most out of those connections and by traveling and meeting in person, attending events and everything, as opposed to the connections that I was gaining out of university, at least right now. I think it could change in the future. But yeah, I think leaving school really gave us the opportunity to travel, meet the brands. And we noticed the company also grew much faster than before.
How did you, so once you, like the second you left university, how did you start adding more time into your business?
The first 2 weeks, I actually was less productive because it's kind of weird to have all that newfound time. Starting YouTube in middle school and going into high school, I was just kind of sitting around watching TV for the first couple of weeks. And then I was like, okay, I got to make my first video now after dropping out. I think it's just, you got to stay honest with yourself. And I was a little bit worried when I wasn't doing anything for the first couple of weeks after university, but then it just kind of clicks and you're like, okay, let's get to action. Let's interview these people. Let's like hire this. Let's tie up the business side. Like I made a promise that I was going to my parents that I was going to make the most out of it. So yeah, it ended up kind of going to plan. You got to have a plan. At the end of the day, sometimes it's good to just go into it, kind of like this podcast. But for a big decision like that, when you're in your 4th year, especially, you got to have like some sort of plan that jumps into action. So yeah, ever since then, it's been a lot of traveling up until the past couple months, about 50 flights in the first year, 100 in the second year, just nonstop flying around. Lots of videos, still a lot of improvement to do. Growth has been pretty steady. And also like renovating the place last year was something that I wouldn't have been able to do during school. And I think that was now it's starting to look like a great decision because stuck at home, at least everything's the way that I like it to look. And yeah, and I think the company has performed to expectation. I think since dropout, it's generated 7 figures, which I couldn't have imagined before. But yeah, I think looking back at it 2 years, it was a good decision. But then now it's another decision to make. Classes have gone online, which has never happened before in history. It's probably the only time it's going to happen, unless we have a second wave. So I've been in class for 4 days, and I still feel like it's as much of a waste of time / distraction as it was before.
Well, let's say like just to kind of keep it on the university track, just for an example, let's say someone's in a BCom right now.
Yeah.
And they want to start something on the side online, let's say a media channel. Like, what would you give as an advice piece to them?
I would say you have to start doing it while you are distracted by something else, whether it's like a daytime job. You have to start it out as a side. I think there's a book called Side Hustle, and it talks about like the importance of and like the steps to be able to start that company. And I heard it's a pretty good book. I don't really read, but I think to be able to tell if you are committed and ready enough, you got to do it as a side. You got to give up time that you would otherwise use as enjoyment to focus on your side hustle. And if you're willing to do that and you're able to for a long period of time and you're seeing results, then I think that's a good proof of concept that you're ready to make the leap to go full time. I think a lot of times people, like when they say, like on Dragon's Den, we see this a lot, or Shark Tank, people leaving their full-time jobs or giving up everything that they have in life to jump towards a side hustle, to make it full-time, to make it work. And there's a lot of scenarios where they're just not ready. And as an audience member, you're watching it and you're like, they just gave up everything, but they're just not ready, or the idea is not good. But I think you do have a gut feeling that you're missing out on a lot. And I think that's why everything in the past 2 years have gone as I expected or had hoped, even though it was like a big goal to try to match. It's because I'd been in school for 3 years and I didn't want to be there at any point of those 3 years. That the whole time I was just thinking, every time I was in class, I was like, I want to leave. Like, this is the plan that I want to do if I got to leave. And when it finally was able to happen, just let's do it. Like that kind of thing.
Right. Well, that's do you think being in university for those 3 years and sticking it through was what helped create that almost like internal drive? Because you were sitting there thinking about your business the entire time.
Yeah, for sure.
Played a big part.
I think I don't really have any regrets of sticking around for 3 years. I mean, it's easy to joke about it. Like, man, if I'd left a year earlier than that, what would I be able to do? But then I would have missed out on all the accounting classes, the core business year. I wouldn't have met some of the people that I still kind of talk to today. And then the whole trajectory could be completely different. Like, I wasn't expecting Trevor to come work for me. It just all kind of fell into place. And now another friend recently asked if I was hiring. So yeah, there's so many variables and everything happens for a reason. And if one thing had changed, then the whole trajectory of everything may have shifted. So I don't know. I don't really have any regrets of the past, but in the moment it is a little bit worrying. Like,
right.
Like where it's going to go. What's the ticking? How much time do you have to go back to your degree? And if you're able to manage it down the road, sort of thing. You don't really want to leave it behind completely, especially when 3 years of credits are already completed, which is making the decision tough now as to whether to stick it out or to continue growing the company. Because now there's all of a sudden a lot of things to work on. Classes are online. They're relatively easy. But it's in the middle of the day, 3 hours a day. And there's like the YouTube channel that we're just starting to get a bit of momentum on for this year, which is good. It just had its best month in terms of views, not revenue, because it's COVID season. But yeah, now we got this podcast here. It's a lot of fun. I feel like the potential in the podcast is also huge, especially with the number of guests that we can bring on. And there's also the website. There's Dangerfield, which is a bit of a longer process. But in terms of keeping busy, it's almost like another debate of whether or not it makes sense to leave or not. And with like the space
for being busy, I wanted to add a little bit more of a note was, how are you managing your time right now? Like actual like software or like personally, do you just jot it down? Like what are some tactics that you're using right now?
I think it's just a creature of habit. Yeah. Well, Nick used to call me an American psycho because I would just like stick to a very specific habit every day. And, and it wasn't a good habit either. It was just like, I mean, waking up a little bit late, a nice sugary coffee every day. But that wouldn't change the way that I did things. And I think especially right now that I've been at home all this time, I've tried to improve as much as that as possible. And, and I mean, I think another factor is that because I like what I do most of the time, aside from having to sit in front of the camera in the middle of the day or twice a day, I work on it a lot. Like every day we'll film and kind of the daily operations, but as soon as Trevor leaves, I'll get dinner and then I'll edit from 8 to 12 every day, no matter what. And then on weekends,
so how do you stay on track with all that? Like, how do you know what video to edit? How do you know what projects are coming up?
I'm trying to learn new software like Notion. I think now is a good time to learn software. We switched over to accounting software last year, QuickBooks, and are still trying some growing pains with that. But Apple Notes is what I use right now. Keep it simple. The rest of it's in your head and you just kind of get in a flow of things and keep up with the schedule. But I think what people don't realize is that YouTube is a small business. People look at YouTube channels and they're like, oh, you're just making some videos here and there. But I would almost say it has just as many variables as a small business, if not more. You got to plan the videos. You got to plan your budgets. You got to figure out what to spend on a video. I also sell some of the stuff and manage brand deals that you have to figure out. And obviously like fixed costs, employees, payroll was also something that was new to me. I forgot to give employees the T4 the first year I incorporated, which is pretty funny because they ended up calling the payroll guy, and the payroll guy is like, well, I think he was supposed to give it to you like 2 months ago, and I had no idea. I just kept them. But yeah, it's I think every aspect that a small business has, it's a big misconception. Like you might look at a retail store and that's considered a business no matter what. Like no matter what it sells, a retail storefront is a business. But a YouTube channel or a marketing company that doesn't have a retail storefront might actually be generating way more revenue than a tangible goods business. And I think that's the biggest thing I've learned in the clothing side. You've got to scale a lot before that thing starts making money. So yeah, daily routine. It's not the best one. I think you could talk a bit about when you took me to Whole Foods and what did you make me buy again? And it was like $300 worth of stuff.
Well, here's the thing. You've got ways that you can optimize your life. Maybe in like 1%, you can tweak it. I think it was a book I read, Atomic Habits, and how the French riding team, they just tweaked everything by 1% in each area, and they eventually went from the worst to the best. And you can do that in your daily life. But the thing is, they were out riding every single day. They were working. And a lot of guys will end up tweaking their life
whole thing
by 1%, but they're still not doing anything. They're not working. And the thing is, you have something that works for you. You're working as much as you can.
But it makes you stubborn. It makes you really stubborn sometimes.
Yeah. Well, there is that shred that you want to be open-minded to it, but there's also a learning curve. Just like when you started out, you weren't going to start out with red cameras and the fanciest stuff. You have to learn as you go. It's just like any skill. Like a skill is your morning routine and your habit and your body. But there also is a skill business. I was willing to listen to anything.
I think like when you took me to Whole Foods, I mean, I had terrible skin. So I was like, dude, whatever you tell me to buy, I'm going to buy it. And I think it was like mushroom powder, the 6 mushroom powder. And then it was like some of the...
You were on Accutane at the time and it was working just fine. Like
it was recently. Like 6.
You were on Accutane at that time.
No, it wasn't.
No, it was. I was when we went out. It was more for brain stimulation in the mornings, just to take a high fat.
It didn't taste very good though, and I think I just gave it all away.
Well, you're drinking sugar and coffee every single morning. That was my bad. I should have like massaged you into the
cold shower thing was pretty funny.
Yeah, I live a little extreme in that sense, and that's just because I enjoy it at this point. And if looking back, it would have sucked. The biohacking thing, but.
I got to learn biohacking. I still don't exercise at all. Like I think it's funny. I guess I just live on the metabolism side because, I have no sense of a good routine, aside from just, I don't know, working a lot. And I think another thing is a lot of times, going back to the dropout topic, people always say things that they want to do and they've got like ideas and they tell everybody about it, but I noticed that a very small percentage, and it was kind of a surprise to me, a very small percentage actually does what they want to do. Like they spend more time talking about it, writing about it, trying to manifest as opposed to the time that you could spend doing stuff. And I understand it's a good thing to write down what you want to do. And I do that like really quickly on notes.
Well, on that topic. This is some philosopher I came across actually wrote about this, and it's, you feel like you're doing something by writing it down and talking about it, but you're really not doing anything. Yeah. But it's disguised as action when really it's not action.
I think you just got to jump in and just do it. Spend that time that you want to write down and think about it by just jumping in and doing it. That's the same way I started YouTube. Yeah. That's the same with the podcast. I was like, we're not waiting to start this podcast. We're just going to hop right in. Whether it's good or not, hopefully it's okay. Let's just do it.
I hope so, man. I mean, look at this. We're filming with a red camera. We've got these Shure mics. We've got like a new Rode Procaster. You got an iPad Pro. I mean, you've had experience in video. We're just having fun with it. But yeah, that's exactly the point. It's just start it and sit down. And
I just can't stress that enough, though. Like, I see so many people. They're like, I want to write down my goals. I want to journal about them. I'm gonna meditate, or like, I don't know. I think just gotta
very woohoo.
Just gotta jump in and do it. And it doesn't cost you don't have to buy anything. You just like use your iPhone or something. It's at the end of the day, it's about the content. If anything, our video quality is good because I'm trying to compensate for my lack of talking abilities. The tough thing about school is a lot of times people finish their degree and they don't know what to do. And I've seen firsthand situations of that, because I think school sets a very specific path for you to get a job afterwards. But I think that 4 years could be used to discover what your like passion is, whether it's photography, videography, starting a business. I think 4 years is more than enough time to tell if an idea is good or bad,
right?
Especially in this day and age and with the resources available. Like what 4 years of your life would you say changed the most, and what were like the different steps? Because I remember for a bit, we met at a time where it was like you were in fashion, I was in YouTube, and then you went to go work in fashion. You were working at Best Buy first, and then after the real estate phase, and then the podcast, and then real estate again. Like, what was like the kind of?
Well, I think we draw a lot of similarities and parallels. I just wanted to try, man. I just kept working, and if something excited me, I just go and do that. It was like this competitive drive to be the best. I didn't go to post-secondary, but when I was working at when I was selling cars,
were you considering it?
Not at the moment, because I just didn't see the value in it. But right out of high school, it was like my parents gave me the option of you either go to school or you work, and so that's what I had to do. And I went and worked at an auto body shop, and then I went from 8 to 4, and then after that I'd go work 5 to 9 at Thrifties and cut fruit. I mean, I was just doing what I could to make and support myself at the time, but I did that on repeat until I worked in phones, which was a great thing to get into sales and something.
We have a lot of tech discussions about that.
Yeah, man. That was a real good stepping stone into something that was more important than chopping up fruit. Although that was like, there's a book I read by David Epstein called Range, and it talks about how the things that you do at a broad scope give you the ability to see the narrow. And if you only have worked the narrow, you can only see things one way. But when you've done so many different things, you have so many different ways of seeing things. And that's how his whole opinion is how generalists rule the world now.
That applies to anything, though, I think. Like, even on a platform basis, like say a YouTuber and an Instagrammer talking with each other about like how the business works. An Instagrammer thinks a YouTuber makes no money, and a YouTuber thinks Instagrammers can't make a living. And it's the same way where I met a friend in my building who has made, I'm guessing, a lot of money off of online courses.
Right.
And he has no idea how YouTubers make money, and I have no idea how those online courses make money. And it's not until you kind of step into each other's world, you're learning it from complete like scratch, that your kind of scope of everything changes a bit. Like, I mean, I didn't even know how podcasts made money until it clicked with me that it's the same as YouTube videos. You're selling ads. It's on a CPM basis, and like the value of online courses and tangible goods. Like, I think a lot of times when the misconception is that YouTubers aren't able to make a living. And even though it's a very small percentage, I think once you learn, it kind of opens all these doors and ideas, and it motivates people to try it for themselves. But even the amount of people that try it, there's still a very small percentage that is able and willing to commit that amount of time to see if it's something that will work.
Right.
So I think it's cool that you do have a lot of experience. That's something that I don't have. I've never had I don't know if you can call it a real job, because.
But the thing is, you were obsessed with what was your side hustle. You were working on something, and if I continued in the fashion, it would have blown up. But I didn't want to continue working on that. I felt it was dragging me down, and I was just narrow scoped, high ego. But yeah, working at Best Buy was a cool experience. Just getting to know the tech. The discounts were unbelievable. You can, if you know someone there, first of all, never buy Insignia. That should just be
unless you're buying like compressed air cans.
Why was that?
For like dusting things off. Those are usually like $20 a can.
Oh yeah.
They were like, like $3 to $4.
Yeah. Never buy it just for the margins purely. The margins are just ask, like, even if you're walking in there, you're buying Insignia, just see if just ask them if they can do any better, or just ask them if that's their best price. And eventually, most guys they're new to sales. Oh, well, I could probably do $10. And there you go. You got yourself a discount. But yeah, they were really good. And great place to work for as well. You're just surrounded by tech and guys that like phones and computers, and you can just sit and chit chat about that all day.
At what point in a retail job would you say it's time to move on to like a different industry?
Oh, that's a good question.
Like 2 years, 1 year?
I really think you should be like, I thought about this recently, I really think you should be planning about your next move earlier, and not just like leaving like this, but like, for example, when I was in car sales, had I known that real estate was going to be where my passion lied and where I was going to build my business, when I was back in car sales, I would have been planning that client portfolio to taken names. And then when I started in real estate, I would have sent them a message telling them that I was in real estate. But I never took any of my sales job any serious beyond the single transaction. I didn't. That was it, right? Walk-ins, whatever. I didn't think about the rest.
But the customer experience thing, I think, like, you can have a business mind, but in real estate, you got to obviously have the personal aspect as well.
You got to have your touch points in business and personal aspect. Yeah, real estate's really intimate. Absolutely. You're definitely working with someone at a real personal level. Sure. You get to know a lot of things about them. You're going on one-on-one trips and looking at homes. But in your business, like, I mean, if you're asking me, like, did you miss out on anything? Probably not, man. You went to university and I didn't get to do that. And I think that's a huge privilege. I think people that go to university just because they have to, and they're not either working on something like you were, that was your passion, and they're just going because they're going. That's just sad, man. Like, you're being created to come out of there like a superhuman. You're being surrounded by knowledge and people, and you should be absorbing that opportunity.
I think business is a tough one. Like, it's a debate between, like, it's kind of like an arts degree, how people would argue whether you should spend the time perfecting your skill set or you should go. And I think business
actively like working it. Like, while you were in business, at least you had a business you were working and could take little bits and pieces. Exactly.
It definitely adds credibility. And I think, like, if medical field, you need the certification. And if you're going to be becoming an accountant, then it makes sense to go to business school. But I think as an entrepreneur, I think that's what I didn't really mention that before, but I think entrepreneurs specifically, it is going to be a decision between, I feel like in some ways it actually be counter beneficial to go to university, because it does teach you to think in a certain way. And if you believe everything that you're being fed, you can't think differently, because every scenario and every industry is just so different. It's just crazy how, like, in marketing class, the YouTube world wasn't even talked about, but then you've got, like, YouTubers are some of the highest earning, like, single earning marketers in the world. You got guys making 10. I even heard some of the makeup brands are making $100 million a year that are tied to a creator. And even when you start like a marketing company, how many years is it going to take before you make your first 100 million, like, on your own, as a CEO of like a large firm? So I think, the whole school thing is a huge debate. And I think another problem that I had was, like, you're paying a business to teach you business, and it does depend on which school you go to. But yeah, it's for entrepreneurs, I think.
Well, I think marketing's tough, man, because with that, the rate of change with marketing is so fast compared to, like, let's say the university was going to keep up with the rate of change in marketing. Their books would have to change to online. They'd have to have active writers that were integrated in interviewing the latest moguls to find the inner workings on how they could teach these new tactics. But it's books.
Like, and like, some of the profs, like, they're a little bit older, and they've been teaching for a while, and we've talked about this even in this podcast about being stuck in your own bubble. Like, the way I look at YouTube, I've been in it for a while, so it seems natural. But when I look at another industry, I need my eyes to be open to it. And even after that, I may not understand it. And that's the same way I feel about, like, university, the perspective of it, and like how you look at the world from a marketing perspective. And there's stuff you can learn from, like, a traditional aspect. You want to have that as, like, a backbone. But I think, like, as an entrepreneur, just like trying it and learning stuff, I think what this quarantine, I don't like calling it quarantine, I'd say isolation period, has taught is just how fast things can be learned. I mean, YouTube's been going pretty good. So I used to not really want to learn anything new. I didn't want to try podcasts. It's a waste of time. Like, I got to work on my YouTube. I want to go all in on the YouTube thing. But I think, like just in the whole setup process, how quickly we learn within a couple podcasts, we'll hopefully have all our technical issues, if there are any, all hashed out. And these are all skills that are applicable for being in the tech industry. And same with fashion, like learning the e-commerce side, building a website, how to buy a company, and also guiding Alex through the process of incorporating and all the legal things and what costs we should expect. First renovation last year was also a huge learning experience, especially if I really like real estate and want to buy properties in the future and flip them, like where to save money, how to deal with a bad hire. So I think trying things, parents always tell us stuff, like the very general stuff. And usually, like, even though it might be the right advice, you never listen to it until it comes back to bite you a little bit. And that's when you're like, oh yeah, I mean, they told me, but now I realize it, that kind of thing.
We're very narrow focused when we're 19. Like, what would you give, advice wise to a guy that like deep down wants to be an entrepreneur, sees online, really follows it, and he knows the creators, knows a little bit about the business model, but he's at that point where he's considering post-secondary or going all out? Like, what would you say to him?
I think it sounds a little bit hypocritical, but don't follow the advice too closely. Like, I know people like to watch Gary Vee and even this podcast where I'm talking about my perspective of university. You really have to evaluate your own situation. And at the end of the day, whether you're extremely smart or you don't have an idea at all, you just got to be honest with yourself. If your idea is great, then push it. But if it's not, then you have to be able to tell yourself.
Well, how do you know if it's a good or bad idea?
I think there's a lot of signs, like whether the company's making money, whether there's hype behind it, whether there's a story behind it. It's really hard to narrow down. But yeah, I think a lot of times, I mean, I'm kind of opposite. I'm very negative about my own stuff, which is not always a good thing. I mean, I love the set. I think it looks great, and that's good news. But yeah, it's definitely a tough decision, and it is a case by case. If you have a great idea and it's already in a developmental stage and you're able to continue with it, and you need money to fund it, then I would say a better use of time would be part-time job and running it on the side. I don't think post-secondary is going to teach you to think like an entrepreneur. You might find your business partners there, which could be a huge benefit. But in terms of like guaranteed information, I don't really feel like it ended up contributing from an entrepreneurial standpoint, just because there's so many, like, it's a very blanketed approach. You can specialize in certain areas, but there's so many sectors, like whether you want to do marketing. But at the same time, going back to the whole like advice thing online, Gary Vee always pushes people to not care what your parents think, just take the jump, and repetition is key. I think you have to be able to make adjustments to improve and do things better. I think Gary Vee actually thinks that as well. But the reason why he continues to reiterate repetition and just to create stuff, even if you don't have all the tools ready just yet, is to get it stuck in people's head that they need to create. And naturally, you'll evolve what you do to make it better. He's not trying to tell you to make the same thing and just shove it down all avenues of the audience until somebody watches it. He's just trying to get you in the practice of making stuff. And like, I think
you learn through trying, and most people do. They learn through trying, not through thinking about trying.
Yeah. I think we always look back at our old work and laugh at it. Kind of like, I know you're making fun of your
I'm so glad I did
tips.
it. Yeah. Like, you got to just do things rather than like be either like, I think a lot of Gary's message is based on the anxiety and insecurity that's online. It's the fear of posting, why people don't do it.
But with any coaching, like reiteration of ideas is the way to get people to think about it. Like, absolutely. I watch Graham Stephan, and he's been saying, don't buy your iced coffee, spend that money on a Roth IRA or an index fund. And now every time I just joke about it, and it actually does make a lot of sense. It's just, you hear it a lot, assuming you know what you're doing, you'll naturally evolve. I think Gary mentioned that he made like however many hundreds of episodes of Wine Library before it ended up on I think it was the Ellen show. But yeah, I think just creating one thing a day and forcing yourself to create was also how I changed the channel in 2017. Like, no matter what, I would come up with a video, and even if there wasn't an exciting product, would try to think of a product that I already have that I could create into something a little bit different, for that given weekend. When you're at a crossroads, when you're at like a crossroad between like, not liking your job or not wanting to go to school or just are really busy, it is also important to continue to push at what you're currently working on. If that's a side hustle, because you never know, maybe it might blow up at the perfect time.
Well, what if you don't have a side hustle? What if you're just like trying to figure out what it is that you're interested in?
I would say you gotta find the right crowd to help you explore. Like maybe if you have a friend that does videography, and if you have even like a little fascination for it, just ask to go on a shoot and see what it's like, and maybe it might open up to an entire new world. My enjoyment for Formula One came from watching the documentary, which I had never watched before. I had never watched any Formula One. I barely knew who Lewis Hamilton was, but a friend who loves cars was like, you got to watch this whether you like cars or not. And as soon as I watched it, I was like, open up to a new world. And then when I started like learning more about it, I was like, this is like exactly what I like. It's got the tech, it's got the style, it's got the travel and like the storyline behind it. It just opens you up to something new. And I'm usually someone that doesn't like new things very easily. I think I have a pretty narrow scope of what I like. So whenever I do like something, it's like all in. YouTube, Formula One, fashion for a little bit, but that thankfully died out. It was very expensive.
Do you think that feature of you is what has contributed a lot to the growth of your channel? Just wanting to be the best?
I don't know. Obsession? I think the channel's still got to grow a little bit faster, but I think this podcast is another example of finding a new world. Like, who knows, maybe I know a lot of podcasts end up taking over YouTube channels and they don't make any YouTube videos again. I think after doing YouTube for so many years, it's just important to explore other areas, whether I like it or not. If it fails, then it fails. At least I gave it a try and know that that's not an avenue that I want to go towards. And maybe even this whole like going back to school for the second time is another example of like school's just not for me, even though it's like 6 months left. I'm trying to think. What else do you think, the university side, what else can we do?
Like, let's talk real quick. Do you think universities will finally make the transition to online classes, like mostly?
Yeah, I think online learning is good. I know like in-class learning is important in the fact that the teacher or the prof is able to connect with students a little bit better. But in my situation, online learning made a lot of sense because going to class every day was just very tiring. But it does suck for some cases. You do get a better education in person, where you're able to ask questions live, and there's like no technical barriers of doing things. So
what piece of tech? Just one more question: what piece of tech do you think would really contribute to universities if you had to choose one right now?
It's hard to say because my university was trying to discourage using computers. They wanted you to use notes and stuff handwritten. So it's
archaic.
Yeah, it is a bit. It is a bit of a tough one. I don't know. What do you think is like a piece of technology that can benefit?
What I was thinking of there was, for one example is Jordan Peterson live streaming his classes. All of a sudden, he became a phenomenon in Canada and then worldwide. And all he did was set up a camera and have someone record.
Yeah.
But maybe class time brought it down to maybe one a week, and then the rest are online. I think
self-paced is actually a good idea. I signed up for. I think it's a great idea. I don't know if you saw, but like Yale was doing a free course.
Same with Harvard.
And yeah, so I was like, I signed up for one of them for fun, and I was looking at how it was structured, and the way they did it was they recorded the teacher's lecture, and she was talking to students, so it was natural. But all the student questions and stuff, aside from a couple of them in the end, if you wanted to watch, were included. But each clip was no longer than 25 minutes. All the notes would be there; they'd be highlighted, the points, and in the middle of the class, it would have like it looked like an ad break on YouTube, but it would pop up and ask you a question, and you select it. And it's right or wrong. And then you have your readings that are also optional, but they've been kind of blanketed on in the video. And then you have your weekly quiz. I feel like that pace of learning was would have me going back to university if it was an option, as opposed to sitting in each class, going into your different discussion groups, and then coming back in, and each group has to talk about their ideas, but everybody's idea is like almost the same. I think trying to transition a class learning experience to online is not exactly an effective use of time. But instead, if they did a self-pace, people are more likely to engage in it. Because a 3-hour conversation, you're probably only really listening for a shorter period of time, and your attention span dips. That's just the data. Like from YouTube as well, attention span dips after the 30% mark. If you're just getting the meat of it, the content, whatever the prof wants to do to summarize the reading, and you're able to just like jump in and finish your quiz between like a certain period of time, like they give you 2 weeks to do each quiz, then do your assignments and your discussion groups. I think you can even cut down the classes to like one class a week where you're synchronizing and having that discussion, and it's optional for those who want it. But I think using like Coursera and like those free courses that have been uploaded by these major universities, it's actually more effective than I expected. I feel like I learned more off that online course, even though I haven't been keeping up with it, than I did in the first week of going back to a class that was synchronous.
Yeah, I think self-paced would be a great example of a course that could do well. Just because there's some students that want to get in there and excel. There's some students that want to do it at their own pace and have a part-time job and have to work around the schedule.
For sure.
But having the flexibility to work on your course from 10 to 12 midnight, if that's when you're up, and then work all day, rather than a course in the smack middle of the day that you have to be at university for. I mean, what a waste of time.
They try to make you feel like you have stuff to do though, like on a full time, because people are paying quite a bit of money to do these courses. So I think they feel like they have to have you sitting down and talking with a prof to get the full value.
That's tough, man. It's like the business model of university is really what's holding it back.
For sure. I mean, it depends on each university, but I think just to wrap things up, to summarize the whole story of it, I left university 2 years ago, ended up traveling with all the tech brands. We made some videos that were
living the life.
Yeah, I mean, it was tiring. Got a little bit ungrateful about it near the end until it all got taken away. No traveling this year, which is good. It's good to kind of refine things, start new things like this. And but yeah, it's in my case, I think my recommendation is if you have a side hustle and you think it's going pretty well, or you've been working on it for a long time and you just always wanted to go full time and you feel like there's an area that you just haven't discovered yet until you try, then I think leaving university makes a lot of sense. You can go back to a degree, but you often can't go back to an opportunity that's waiting for you. So I just went on academic leave and I still had an active student status, so I can get all those discounts. But yeah, I'm back now and trying to decide if I want to stay. But yeah, if you guys have any questions about that, just drop them down in the comment section. I'll try my best to answer them. And in the future, hopefully also have some of you guys call in and let me know like your specific scenario of going to school or trying to make a decision. And Brandon and I will try to guide you through that and give us the best advice that we can. But thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. I hope I covered things relatively well that I wanted to. I know it's a topic that we can talk a lot about over the span of many hours if needed. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this one, and we'll talk to you in the next one.
Peace.